Ian Spencer, welcome to Shrink Wrap Radio.
Thanks, Dave.
Well, it's great to have you here. I know that you're a graduate of Pacifica Institute, which is close to my heart. And so there's a way in which we both kind of feel like we know each other. You were telling me before we started the recording that you've been a longtime listener, or at least a listener as a result of having been to Pacifica. And I've interviewed a number of faculty and graduates. And you've got such a fascinating background, which is why I've been really eager to speak with you. You've got a master's degree in depth psychology from Pacifica, and you're a practicing psychotherapist. But for 20 years or so, you worked as an editor in reality TV, in the reality TV business. And so that's a fascinating combination of background. And so I want to start off by asking you, so how did you get involved in reality TV?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having. I'm sort of like a little bit nervous in your presence because at graduate school, all of us listen to you, and you have so many intelligent, wonderful speakers on, and you always feel compelled to perform at the level that you imagine that you projected onto other people. But I'll just plod through. I work with people. Clinical is what I always wanted to do. I knew that as soon as I started my studies, I wanted to work with people. And so I'm very comfortable just talking one-on-one. So hopefully that'll carry me through.
Yeah, I think it will.
I had no idea that I wanted to be an editor. I fell into it by accident. I would say sort of, to shorthand for other psychotherapists and those inside the our business, it was really probably my attachment issues that drove me to editing because, I needed a paycheck. Sort of equated earning my living with my own survival.
Sure.
As a result, I just sort of followed whatever paycheck was available to me. And because of my timeline, meaning when I was born and where I was and what I was interested in, I
Oh,
kind of fell
where were you born? Where are you
in
from?
Washington, D.C.
Ah,
Yeah, but
and now you're in LA, right?
LA. I left the East Coast as soon as I could. I love the East Coast, but I just was a kind of rambler. I was kind of feral when I was young, and I headed out west like a lot of people did. And honestly, where else can you get a great paying job where where they don't give a damn where you graduated from, as long as you can show up in time and do the job you're asked, except for the film industry. So
Wow.
I
So
kind of
you went to Hollywood?
I moved to San Francisco first.
Okay.
And I just moved there because it wasn't, I was sort of, I was always kicking against the pricks, so to speak. So I thought, well, everyone goes to LA, so screw LA, I'm going north. So a really sort of backwards kind of nature at the time.
Uh-huh.
And I went up there in San Francisco, if anybody can imagine it, was a wide open space with 2 bedrooms with parking for like $300 a month. I mean, it was a fantasy land.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I fell in with a film studio there called Colossal Pictures. So they were the only game in town. And
Uh-huh.
I cut my teeth there by accident. I was working on the stage and swing shifts. I ended up going under the wing of the editorial department because there's always clever, intelligent, well-read people in editorial departments for some reason. And they brought me up. They just carried me through, even though I didn't really have an interest. Like I said, I just kept chasing that paycheck.
Well, how old were you when you first started working in that?
20 years old, 20 years old. Yeah.
And so at 20, you were working on reality TV.
Well, not yet, because
Oh,
reality
okay.
TV hadn't happened. The
Oh, okay.
fascinating part, there's so many parts of this to discuss. I'll make it really quick.
You
I
don't
was
have to make it that quick. We've got
okay, good,
time.
good. Well, because this is an interesting story. I was in the film industry before reality TV was possible. The reason reality TV became possible were developments in tech.
Yes.
And the capacity to store material and the capacity to shoot material digitally sort of were ascending. Those were dependent on the developments in Silicon Valley. There's hundreds and hundreds, or if not thousands, of hours of footage required for each show that we shoot in
Mhm.
reality TV. It was cost prohibitive, space prohibitive, everything prohibitive to do it before digital.
Uh-huh.
We used to work on
Uh,
celluloid film or pneumatic tape, big 3-inch tape that would go on banks of Sony tape decks, and you'd
Right.
operate this ridiculous thing called a video switcher, and you'd be on DOS, you know, amber screened computers typing out your time codes. It was very labor intensive and space intensive. All that film took up, warehouses and all that sort of thing.
Okay, I
So
understand.
I was there when this digital revolution was occurring, and it was occurring across the board, but it was really being pushed in the film of television. I mean, in the world of film and television, because the needs for television were such that it was the sort of perfect storm for what was happening, which was that this whole new format was kind of invented, this thing called reality TV, where you could just follow someone with a series of cameras over a great period of time. Gone was the old way we'd done film, just monitoring every film roll. You have a 400-foot or 1,000-foot roll, and each one of those accounts for a certain amount of minutes of film, depending on your frame rate, and you're nervously watching the film spin down and thinking about the money. That was gone. We just threw the tape in and let it roll. So I was one of the first people in a generational switch. I was surrounded when I was young by film technicians of the old school, and you probably have some are kicking around. Gray ponytail, Hawaiian shirts, wonderful people.
I got the picture.
Yeah, comforting, wonderful people who are masters of their craft. And they weren't ready for what was going to hit them. I happened to have been at the soundstage on a weekend where a wonderful editor named Mike Toomey called me in to look at this new thing called the Avid, which was developed in Tewksbury, Massachusetts, which was one of the first tech hubs and still is a tech hub, and where a lot of the MIT grads sort of filter out to.
Yeah.
Anyhow, it was this digital editing technology, and they got one early. It was 1992, 91. And he called me into the room and showed me how to operate some basics of it, just on a fluke. He was just a good guy in the editorial department, and I was a nobody, trust me. And maybe 3 weeks later, I was editing a 60-minute commercial for Nike, which was a big deal, because this was a commercial stage. So I went from like this schmuck on the soundstage who was an assistant editor to editing these things because I had this secret knowledge about how to use this new digital tool. And the rest kind of was just history. It was just, I knew how to use the undo button. I knew how to use the insert edit and the add edit. And that's basically all I knew. And then on that tool, and then I was off and running. And the rest just built on itself, because as this big switchover from film to digital medium happened, all of us young bucks who were there on the scene were all of a sudden useful. And, we used to joke about the people like the negative cutters who had a very valuable, important job where they would literally take the negative after we'd edited it and provided them with the film rolls and literally cut the negative with a pair of scissors like your mom would have.
Yeah.
Glue it together and put it on a reel, and we'd take the color transfer.
Oh,
But
yeah.
we joked that you'd come in one day and see just a skeleton leaning over the block. The block is what we called the thing that you cut the film on.
Oh, yeah.
A skeleton hanging over the block with a pair of scissors and a thread of spider web, because that was how it felt. It felt like there was the old world and the new world, and
Yeah.
I was right there at that juncture. Anyway, cut forward. I left San Francisco and moved to Los Angeles. And I just happened to be there when I was looking for an edit job. I called an old friend in New York, and I said, I'm looking for some commercials. And he said, commercials? I got something for you. And I was like, okay. And he said, it's called reality TV. And I'd heard about it, but I sort of thought it was just I don't know what I thought about it. Anyhow, the next day I was working in some god-awful basement at the old Tribune building on the Fox lot, or what used to be the Fox lot over there on Gower. And I was editing this thing called reality TV on this god-awful show called Mr. Personality, which was Monica Lewinsky was the host. And it was this whole new format I had never experienced.
Oh, my
And
goodness.
any good editor just copies the other editors until they understand the game that the particular piece of artistry is following. And so I just followed the other editors. I did what they did. And that was kind of my jump into reality TV. And I never looked back. The work just kept coming.
Yeah, well, I never heard of that show with Monica Lewinsky. Did you get to work on a show at some point that was well known?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, at the time, that was a big show, but that was before people were following these types of shows. I
Yeah.
worked on Shaws of Sunset. I worked on Vanderpump Rules. I worked on Paradise Hotel. I've worked on Forever Eden. I've worked on Married by America. And if you're not in reality TV, these will just bounce off your head.
Yeah, yeah. And I've not heard of any of those. I'm thinking of Housewives of Atlanta, The
Oh, well, I've
Apprentice,
worked on
things
Married
like
to
that.
Medicine. I've worked on Married to Medicine, which is a housewives type of franchise, so I've worked on those. I mean, the ones I'm naming are kind of like saying, I'm sort of like saying the Washington Redskins, the Dallas Cowboys, that, they're big in the world of reality. And then there's been 1,000 things in between. I was very, I think, as I described, very mercenary. I didn't understand what I had in my hands. I just was going for the next check, not
Okay.
in a greedy way, as I described, really honestly, out of my own sense of anxiety about myself and who I am, and survival. It was very, I look at it very differently now, but I can see that now. There was a bunch of junk in between. There's all the type of reality shows that I'm going to talk about in the context of psychotherapy are going to be what we call docu-soaps or docudramas. That's the Real Housewives type of stuff, the Vanderpump Rules. These are the relational programming. What is considered women's programming, right? This
Okay.
is the kind of TV that people say, oh, that's junk. You mean garbage TV? Oh, my
Yeah.
guilty pleasure is this kind of stuff. But it's also where I feel, psyche is sort of alive, and where the shadow is at play, and where all these delicious kind of Jungian archetypes are working their way through our culture. And also where there's great peril, from a therapist's point of view, for those that engage in it, those that are behind, in front of the camera, the stars of, not just reality TV, Dave, but TikTok, YouTube, any Instagram influencers, even, I look at it very differently. Even having this broadcast on YouTube, I had to think about it and sort of take to my own counsel and talk to my partner and really think if it's something I wanted out there,
Uh,
because the image now is so powerful,
yeah.
the way things go out. And so for me, the reality TV is where a lot of it's happening.
Yeah. So there's so you were at the beginning of a really tectonic shift
Mhm.
that has impacted our psyche in ways that we can only begin to guess at, which we're going to be talking, some of the issues that come up.
Yeah,
And one of the first things that comes to my mind is that reality TV, I believe, is such a misnomer, because in one of your blog posts that I read, um, I think that was there, that you said there could be as many as 20 editors
yeah,
working on a given show,
absolutely.
or maybe even a given episode. I don't know.
Well, it definitely varies depending on the culture of, like, one of the ones I described, Paradise Hotel, we'd have a team of 15 during the day, and then there'd be a night shift. So it was upwards towards 20 for sure. And some of the other shows, like Vanderpump Rules, um, a very popular show, that's usually one editor per episode, and it's a very well-oiled machine, but other editors are always contributing. It's never just one person. It's always a team. Yeah.
That's fascinating. You know, and even if it were just one editor or many, you guys are to a large extent shaping the quotes. You're shaping the reality. You're inventing the reality by how you cut it, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, like you're touching the realness question, as I call it, which is like, it drives people nuts because the way we used to do it, of course, is we had real people pretending to be somebody else, right? That's called drama. We always sort of forget that, and we get wrapped up in the proscenium arch, the movie experience, and our emotions are there on the screen, and we're doing all this wonderful transference and countertransference with the image. But those are real people pretending stuff. And there's all kinds of hubbub that happens with people chasing down stars and wanting to know what they're really like and going through their garbage and all this kind of thing, which is funny because they're not the people on the screen, right? They're real people pretending. And reality TV is different because it's sort of real people trying to be real, right? So it's real people. And as I like to say, and it's very crude, but in reality TV, if you're on the cast, you've got to take off your clothes and beep, it's an F word that I would use, but in the editor world, you've got to take off your clothes and F emotionally, right? If you're on reality TV and you are not really being honest about what's going on, even if it's a totally phony setup, and this goes to the heart of the realness question. A lot of reality TV is produced, meaning that if we were doing a scene between Ian and Dr. Dave, a producer might say, Dr. Dave and Ian, you're going to go to an ice cream parlor and you're going to talk about something. We're going to talk about the money I owe my doctor. I don't know. And so we filmed that scene knowing that that's what we want to talk about. So the artificial part is that you and I have been put together artificially to have a conversation that has emotional weight, right?
Yeah.
It's my responsibility as a reality TV star to actually bring the truth. So I can't just make stuff up. I mean, I could, but then the story would be about how Ian went to a scene and made stuff up. Do you know what I mean? So there is realness.
There's realness, and it's kind of like psychodrama in a way, I think. Because in psychodrama, sometimes the therapist will be directing the person to go into a certain kind of emotional space, let's say, and might break in and say, let's do that again, but this time come from this kind of place.
Absolutely.
And there's something similar happening in, quotes, reality TV.
You're so right. And I had never thought of calling it psychodrama, and I'm going to borrow that from you in the future, and you'll get credit.
Right.
But it's like, I hadn't thought about it because that's exactly what's happening.
Yeah.
Sometimes fan sites will balk and create a big flap because they see something incongruous in the footage or something, and they think it's fake. But what they don't realize is, just as you described, we might reset to do an entrance because we didn't catch it.
Yeah.
The audience wants to feel like it's seamless, so we retake it, or we do stop down and say, okay, Ian, you're very heated, you're very upset. I understand, but you're not being honest about this, Ian. Tell him why you're upset. And so they'll prompt and push the person back into the lion's den.
Uh-huh.
There are things also that happen completely spontaneously. In that fictional scene I described, where Ian and Dr. Dave at the ice cream parlor, things happen. Maybe I had been cheating on my partner, and the person I'm cheating with happens to be in the ice cream parlor, and the big fracas occurs. That kind of thing happens.
Yeah.
Get real.
And that's gold.
That's
For
gold.
you, as the editor, producer of a show like that, stuff that would happen kind of accidentally, spontaneously, etc., that would be gold, right? Because it would have that feeling of being real.
Absolutely. And the important part is the stakes, right? Sure, it'd be real if I just tripped on something. That'd be funny, and there'd be a little bit of slapstick if I fell over something. That's real. But what the most important real part is that emotional, the emotional kernel. That's the important part. And the reality stars that aren't willing to share themselves in this way never have legs. They're not going to stay on the season because everybody becomes, they sense the fakeness, which is funny because in acting, we're sure, when it seems fake, we don't like it. But in dramatic acting, we never think about that. What we want is fakeness. So we're craving that the fakeness will be so great that we won't notice it.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, I'm fascinated with this degree that this power that the editors and producers, directors, all you folks have to, because on these reality shows, some people will emerge as evil.
Yeah.
And some will emerge as stupid and like fools.
Yeah.
And you have a lot of power in deciding who will fit into that kind of role, right?
It's really true.
And you can cut it to, I mean, my experience of being interviewed, like for a newspaper article or something like that, you can be so distorted by the press, by the reporter or whoever it is. It's just they can decide what kind of slant to put on it. And so the same thing is happening, only to a much greater degree, in quotes, and I always want to use quote marks, air quotes, reality TV.
Absolutely. I mean, so much so. I mean, my mind swims with examples, but I'll make it really clear. I mean, definitely, first of all, to your point of us sculpting it, the story team goes like this. There's us editors supporting us as a whole story team, with story producers, as they're called, and story assistants. They're
Okay.
gathering the directives from the producer and the executive producer. The executive producer is known as the showrunner. So the showrunner says the storyline of Ian is that he hasn't paid off his doctor this season, and so he's pushing these stories and he's gathering information from the shoots, and he's got this thing called a hot sheet that says, yes, there's a great scene where Ian and Dr. Dave talk about this, and he gives it to the story producers. The story producers gather a sort of bulk amount of this footage, everything related to this scene, and then the editors edit it. But what happens sometimes is that while I'm editing, I might hear someone's microphone, because everybody's wired for sound. So I might hear a microphone, because there's multi-cameras. I might hear a microphone from some smaller character somewhere else. Maybe the camera's not even on them. And I hear him say, you know what, I went through Ian's mail and I know exactly how much he owes. All of a sudden, we've got a whole new storyline, and we might go back and get all that footage related to that sneaky character that looked through my mail. And that's something the editor found. The editor, what I call followed mics, follows the mic. You know, I just followed the information and found this important piece of story that we plug back in as a piece of input. And it could become its whole storyline. It could change, those kind of things change people's story arcs in the entire, from one of these things. The other way that we sculpt the characters is, as you said, archetypes are alive and well in reality TV. Reality is far from garbage. In fact, reality TV has many more archetypes than sports has. You know, sports is the sort of masculine version of reality TV. And that's why I call reality TV women's content or women's programming, because it's sort of dismissed in the same way that women are in our culture. You know, women embody so much of what we do as humans, yet they're kind of shoved off to the side. That's why there's so much juicy content there, because no one's watching that. And we can get into that later. But when we have an archetype such as the villain, it's just casting, right? Every good reality cast needs a villain. So you have this person. No one's all good or all bad, but you have someone who has villain tendencies. And so what we do is, let's say we have 1,000 hours of footage of this villain. We just take the tiny slice of the pie that makes him appear the most villainous.
Yeah.
And that's all we present.
Yeah.
And so at the end of a couple shows, everybody's thinking, let's say I'm the villain. Everyone's thinking, man, Ian is such a jerk. Did you see the way he acted? And there it is, real, with air quotes, as the day is long, Ian being a villain. Now, of course, I could do this to anybody. If I had a camera on anyone for 1,000 hours, I could pick cases out where someone was, you know, less than wonderful, or maybe they were upset, or maybe they stubbed their toe, or maybe I just fake it all together with looks and music. And I can make somebody look villainous. And I have an example, and it works. And the fascinating part about reality television, when the reality star sees themselves as the villain, even if they don't think of themselves as the villain, they begin to act and think as the villain. Because what they're seeing is, they're seeing this reflection, both in the culture and on the TV screen, of themselves as villains. And it's almost irresistible to sort of bend their brain. There was one character on this show who the crew, the editors, had decided, for a number of silly reasons, that they hated. That happens. And as editors, you're like, oh, I hate this person. They drive me crazy.
Yeah.
And we had all decided, every time we cut to this person, we're going to show them eating. Every time we get a chance, because a lot of these reality setups are based around food. And this show in particular, food is a very important part of the culture. So every time we had a shot of this character, we showed them stuffing their face. Now, I want to point out, this character was not round or big or otherwise described as fat. We just chose to do this as a sort of inside joke. So much so that the executives at Bravo TV, who was making the piece, wrote a note to our EP and said, look, no more shots of that character eating. It's driving us nuts. What's up with this? Anyway, the following season, I was doing what I said. I was following mics. And I heard this character speaking to her sister off camera. I just happened to be listening because they were having a conversation. I thought, what little gems will I discover here? And the sister said, hey, why aren't you eating? And the subject said, oh, God, are you kidding me? I'm trying to diet. And why are you dieting? And, oh, babe, did you see me last season? Every time the camera was on me, I was stuffing my face. So in her mind, she imagined she was overeating, when in fact she simply wasn't. It's just that we had put this image of her out there, so much so that she believed that she was always eating. It's that powerful.
Yeah, that was a fascinating thing that you discussed in one of your blog posts, that there's a kind of splitting going on, psychological splitting, where where being on camera is a dangerous thing,
Mhm.
because not only is it influencing the audience, but there's a kind of feedback loop that you're describing here, that if I'm on camera and I'm seeing how I come across, that's going to impact my behavior and myself, my feelings about myself.
Absolutely. I mean, in group therapy, when we do groups, it's very impactful, right? That's the sort of basis of the behavioral approach around groups, is that when you're in your group and you see your behavior reflected negatively, it's very powerful.
Yeah.
But feedback loop is kind of in this vacuum of the television. It's like frozen over there in time, and the thing it would be very sinister in groups if I could direct somebody to project something that I thought would be harmful to them, right? I mean, that would be, I hope I would lose my license if that was found out. But in reality TV, we do that for the purposes of our storylines. Now, we're not making anybody do anything, but we're playing sometimes to their worst instinct. And they are beholden, because as we're describing, as they become the character and they fulfill their role, they're delivering us what we want, and we are delivering them what they want, and they feel beholden. The checks start coming in,
Of
the endorsement,
course.
the celebrity, all that kind of stuff. And so they start to know that the established characters actually pitch their storylines to the producers in the off season. So the producer might say, okay, what's happening in your life? What do you got? And they might pitch it. They might say, well, I'm going to freeze my eggs this season. Or, well, I'm thinking about getting married. Or sometimes these characters are even like, look, I'm thinking of breaking up with my boyfriend. Shh, and so they pitch their own stories, and they engage in this feedback loop.
Yeah.
Now,
Wow.
the part where that I sort of have this strange specialty is that I understand this complex psychological field, and I know the toll it can have. you know, Again, it's important. TikTok star or TV star. I would almost say the TikTok stars are almost more vulnerable because they haven't at first got the same money and the structure and the clout that a TV star has. They're
Tell
just,
me about TikTok, because I've heard it referred to, but I'm too,
well,
I
think of
guess, I've never gone to it. I've never checked it out. What is it?
TikTok is I don't know if you remember Vines, but it's a more short format type of um, social media site, sort of like Snapchat, but on like
Yeah.
steroids. And so it's infinite, and it's very popular with young people, and it's basically a place to do a quick short video, and any subject, anything goes. But it's sort of like a Instagram in that way. So you can search any kind of subject, you can search any kind of things, and there's certain genres within it. But it's just a short form social media platform.
Is there a limit? How many minutes can a clip be, or
No,
seconds?
I don't know the answer to that, but they're
Oh,
generally short. Yeah,
okay.
they're generally short.
Okay.
But it's basically, so we could say YouTube, we could say Instagram, we could say whatever we want. It's just that TikTok has a lot of young people. And so when you're young, you're not always making the best decisions. You're not always thinking about what this all means and where you're headed and where you're going. Reality television sets, oftentimes, especially if it's a sequestered show or a show on location, will have therapists there. I don't. I wouldn't do one of those jobs, I don't think, because I know a little bit too much of how they make the sausage, and I would feel a conflict of interest about what I'm there to do, right? Because I would, for instance, if my son wanted to join the cast of reality TV, um, I would let him do it because that's his choice. But I would have great reservations, and I would be concerned for him.
Yeah. 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 It could be kind of a meat grinder. and particularly if there's a lot of money involved,
Yeah.
I think of these some of these reality stars, and again, my universe that I can refer to are Housewives of Atlanta, and
Uh-huh.
the Real Housewives of Atlanta. That was a pretty engaging show,
Yeah.
and with a lot of drama and sort of shifting cliques,
Yeah.
and social alliances and so on. And those women became really, really stars,
Yeah.
uh, and and they're aware that they're stars and they're playing to their stardom.
Yeah.
So it's got to be shaping them, and then their relationships and getting into fights that I suppose have a level of realness.
Yeah. Yeah, because they're essentially, they essentially become a workplace, right? So at first they're ostensibly friends, and it's usually the setup is usually like a group of outrageous people who live this aspirational life in some city, and they've got their tagline and their thing, but they essentially become work buddies, right? And then the work buddies are filmed, and their job is as reality TV stars. And the setups are always like, oh, we're throwing a 15th birthday for my daughter, or we're gonna, go get our dogs groomed, or whatever it is. But they're essentially work buddies, and we film them. And as you just, said, it's very engaging. And the reason it's engaging is this is actual relationships, and that's where the realness question comes back in again. These relationships are real in the same way that our work relationships are, in the same way that you and I, we're having a real conversation now. There's a setup to it, right? You have this wonderful podcast, and I am honored to contribute to it. So that's the setup. But the things
Yeah,
that we're expressing are very real to who we are. In the same way reality TV is like that. And that's why it's so engaging, and that's why it hooks people, because we see reflected in these shows, almost no matter how goofy they are, some of our own aspirations, some of our own projections are fulfilled there. And also, we get to engage in our shadow material as a culture. We get to see people being outrageous. We get to see people spending their money in foolish ways. We get to see people being having sex with people they shouldn't be having sex, and quitting or firing or flaming out, in ways that we don't have to, or for some of us, in ways that we relate on some scale. The very authentic relationships happening, even in the phoniness.
yeah. So, sort of the area that we're touching on now, I think that I'm interested in is, what motivates the viewers,
Yeah,
and you're pointing out that it may play to our aspirations, to our hopes, maybe to some of our fears,
yeah,
to the stuff that might be active in us, but we don't act out, but we
absolutely.
can see somebody else acting it out, and we can be judgmental. TV
Yeah,
allows us to have. There's some shows that my wife likes to watch that I watch as a result. Fashion shows, uh, and and so we make these critical remarks to each other, about how this person looks or how they are,
yeah, yeah.
and it really plays into that judgmental quality that I think we all have in us somewhere, even though we're trying to be very zen and not engage in judgment, but it's a pretty human thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And though there's a medieval scholar somewhere that is dying at this sentence, but it reminds me of Shakespeare, and I'll tell you how.
yeah,
It reminds me of Shakespeare because those experiences at the Globe were actually known to be very bawdy, right?
yeah,
There was the common people were there in the pit, and they loved their men dressing as women. They loved watching someone get cuckolded or some sort of awful body send up, and they're doing what you're saying. They'd be screaming out, "Oh, look at the slut! Look at they're yelling from the audience, just eating it up, drinking it up with all
interesting.
the bad behavior and
Yeah,
foolish behavior." Shakespeare knew what the people wanted, and he knew how. He would have been a wonderful maker of reality TV. He would have, if it was a he and if it was him who wrote it, he would have loved, reality TV. And I really believe that. There's also in reality TV the archetypes, right? It's dripping with it. It's got the hero, it's got the fool, it's got the puer, the eternally youthful, naive, Peter Pan
Yeah.
character. It's got all of these wonderful things. I think Jung would have been fascinated by it as well. It's got the story archetypes. There's always, rags to riches and the hero's journey and the hero's return and all these kind of things that make it
Yeah.
infinitely engaging underneath the veneer of BS. It's got that
Yeah.
veneer.
Yeah. So, and so what motivates it's probably obvious, what motivates the people who are in front of the camera,
Mm.
the people who,
Yeah,
their desire for stardom, for fame, etc.,
yeah, I think it's.
money.
I mean, it's a really good question. I know every individual will have their own, but I think the basic one is they're thirsty. That's a reality. I think the basic one is that they're wanting, probably for the same reasons I chose to get involved in the film industry. I'm guessing that the situation presented itself, and there was a combination of sort of youthful hopefulness and just needing the attention. I don't know any of these individuals personally, so I would never diagnose somebody that wasn't coming to me for the purposes of diagnosis. But my guess is there is a need for this kind of attention, a need for this kind of ego gratification, and amidst all the other needs. But generally, it's for fame. People come to LA and they want to be famous. Now, what they end up with is usually something very different. If they knew what I knew, they would maybe stop down and look at the unconscious elements related to their need to put themselves in these, what I think
Yeah.
are relatively dangerous positions. But they come and they get drawn in, and I would love to find out from some of them what they. I mean, I do get that opportunity, but like some of that are on screen right now, I would love to ask and find out. But I think it's for fame.
Yeah. Yeah. Fame, narcissism
Yeah.
certainly has got to play a role in there.
Totally. And I want to be fair to them. It's like it might be even no more narcissism than any one of us has, and,
Right.
and that's why I always, the younger kids I sort of worry about to some extent, because remember, one sort of viral thing, and I've used this example before, there was a student at UCLA who made some horrible racist unthinking comment about Asian mothers, and I don't know if she meant Chinese Asian or I don't know what type of Asian she saw, but someone's mom at UCLA, and she was promptly sort of shouted down and ended up with a nervous breakdown and left school and disappeared, right? So she never had a chance to sort of understand her position and come to terms with it. But my point of that is that this one little thing that she felt to got off her chest and ranted into her camera and put it online was the end of her career as a student at UCLA. It's like these
Yeah.
things happen. We're all sort of one click away from calamity, but we were
Yeah.
putting these things out here willingly because we want attention, we want to be seen, and we want all the stuff that is good. But, it's normal
Yeah.
to want to be reflected, to have twinship, to be in community, with our fellow humans. But it's kind of like there's dangers. There be dragons.
So, two big questions. In what ways is reality TV good for us? And in what ways is it not good for us? Is it hurt? I'm thinking from a cultural
Yeah.
perspective, is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? Is this making us worse as people? Are there ways in which it's making us better as people? What are your thoughts around those kinds of questions?
It's a difficult and deep question that I'm not sure I'm qualified to answer, but I'm going to give you my opinions.
Yeah, that's all I want.
Um, I'm going to say that there's a neutral quality in that one can say, what has film given us, right? So there's a neutral quality in that it's just a tool. The format of reality TV, as I described, is born from technological advancements. I'm thinking of the early cave paintings where it's just a palm on a piece of rock. That's a funny kind of reality TV, and I'm not sure that if our ancient ancestors had access to filming themselves, that they wouldn't have had reality TV from the get-go. I sort of see it as like, if sheep had camera, what would they film? Probably grass and fence another sheep, like, so I think there's an element of neutrality in it, in that this is a format. And it was a new way to look at the format. Oh, we can film everything. Oh, and we can narrate it because, with ourselves. So in some ways it's neutral. It's only as dangerous as the operators, meaning the human organism, right? But how it may, I know there's others who think that reality TV is garbage, but I encourage them to think more deeply about it and reflect more deeply and say, who is reality TV for? And I'm talking about the docu-soaps, the docudramas. And there I bring in this term that was coined by Brie Dellinger, who's a film editor, women's programming, and, in relation to reality TV. And when we say to ourselves, oh, wait a minute, reality TV is women's programming, a question immediately pops in your head. It has to, because if you say, oh, the bulk of viewership is women, you have to wonder. And then you have to think of any viewership, why is it so? And so we can't dismiss it right away because there's that word problematic pops up. Well, I can't simply dismiss something women like, right? What is that? What does it mean? What does it mean that they're drawn to it? What is being expressed? So then I jump to the next level of questioning and say, oh, okay, well, if this is expressing some aspect of the culture of women in America right now, and of course, UK and all over the world, if this is embodying some voice, some aspect of spirit as it relates to the feminine, it's got a deep, deep value to be valued. There's no reality TV Emmy. There's no reality TV. There's a lot of missing gaps because the drama world doesn't want to admit it has value. They want us to say, oh, our people who are pretending are more valuable. That's that can't be possible. The people who are real and also doing their own version of pretending are also valuable. And that's my sort of soapbox about, like, we can't dismiss it. It simply can't be garbage. In fact, any anthropologists know that garbage isn't even garbage. Garbage is almost the only thing we have next to burial sites to link us to the past, right? So I think that so now I'll focus on the good. I've just sort of made an argument of the neutrality of the form, and I've stated why I suspect there's much good in it and why there's not a lot of bad. And now I'm going to go to what I think is the good. And I think I've already answered that, in that the good is that it gives voice to a vast body of viewership. It allows us to reflect ourselves in the epoch that we're in, which I think is healthy. It also allows us a sort of, like you had said, someone to rail against. You can scream at the TV, you can be aggravated at, you can be angry at it. It gives us that release and that relief. And I think also, more importantly, it's a place where real emotion is on display in our media.
Yeah, as in drama,
Yeah.
that
It's like
it's
actual
so
emotion.
easy to cry in a play or in a movie, to let those emotions be evoked in a way that we close down when we're outside of the theater.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's occurring to me that reality TV is both a mirror and a window, and
Absolutely.
we think we're looking through a window
Yeah.
at something out there that we call reality, but it's also reflecting. If we're thoughtful at all, we have to realize it's reflecting back to us
Yeah. I feel like I could make
about
a good
who we are.
reality TV out of any family. Like if I could have had this whole dialogue that we're having about family systems, which I love. I could make a fantastic reality show out of almost any family if I had access to it. And
Actually, that was done. I can't remember the name of it, but it was on PBS years and years ago, before there
yeah,
was what.
that was American Family, and that was the first reality TV show. I don't think they knew they were making one, but they documented the show and the family in Santa Barbara, and I can't remember, it was 30 hours maybe, but that's a fantastic piece of proto reality. And in fact, what starts off as a narrated sort of story about a normal American family does descend into a storyline of infidelity, divorce. One of the sons is openly gay and moves to New York City. It like all the stuff that you want from a reality show actually happens on that show.
Yeah, and so I think and people were fascinated by it, right? Because it was reality. And that one, I suspect, because it was so early, was probably less dir- less directed.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was, and it's sort of, and you know, from my background, it suffers from it a little bit too, just because they, you know, both from the tech and from the lack of direction, because we miss some links, but they did a wonderful job, and it's a wonderful piece,
Yeah.
and it feels like a documentary. That's the difference, even though it has some curated aspects to it. It feels very much like a documentary, which I think what it meant to be. It didn't know that it was being reality TV.
So what's the relationship between documentaries and reality TV? It seems like there is some kind of relationship there.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, the now most watched documentary in the history of documentaries is this Tiger King documentary, which you may or may not have seen it.
I did watch it, the whole
Right.
thing.
So woven
I
into
shouldn't admit it, but it was
that. Yes, you did
fascinating.
it. I love it. Yeah, totally. We have to embrace the fact that just if we like media doesn't make us less smart.
Yeah, there are people in my family who look at me with condemnation,
I
"Oh,
know.
how could you watch that?"
I know. Well, there's this idea, and that's why I mentioned the Shakespeare thing. There's this idea that if you have things that are, you know, aspects of bodiness or uncouthness or unintelligence or whatever it is that you're somehow devaluing yourself, which I don't believe in. I mean, we could have had a whole discussion about reality TV and pornography, because the same thing that happened in reality TV happened in pornography, meaning that on one level it was the bottom dropped out of it because there was no more value in the pornographic images because anyone could make them. On top of that, there was a consolidation of the industry, and only about 3 individuals basically control all of the pornography that the whole world sees anyway. And this is as a result of the tech meets reality TV. But that's a side thing. Tiger King actually has in its story a reality show, right? One of the characters, the person who sort of cracked the code on this in the beginning before the documentarian got hold of the footage, was a guy who was trying to make a reality show about it, right? That guy with the gravelly voice and the hat,
Yeah, yeah.
whatever his name is. So reality TV is already in it. I would posit that documentary is much closer to a reality TV show than it is to a documentary. And I would also go further to say, I feel like a lot of documentaries are reality TV shows. And what I mean by that is that the realness question is always needs to be there with documentaries. What was the agenda of the documentarian? What was the way that it was pushed? What are the ways that we only saw certain things and not others? Who were the people who were coerced or not coerced? And it goes on and on and on.
It, 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 what comes to mind is non-directive therapy.
Yeah,
The idea that we struggle with of, okay, how can we have this be pure and not
right.
direct? And then we realize, well, wait a second, it's unconsciously directed at some level,
Yeah,
or there are subtle ways in which it's being directed, either consciously or unconsciously.
absolutely.
And in documentaries, I think there's a whole range of documentaries, some that really aspire to just have been there, just a camera that was there, and that there was no agenda. And when it ends, it just kind of ends, like a lot of New Yorker articles are that way
Yeah.
sometimes. That there's a story and you're engaged with somebody, and then there's that little symbol that says this is the end of the article.
Yeah, they sort of take you so far, and they don't hold your hand. They present you with a series of facts and interviews, and they let you make your own decision. You know, there's many great American documentarians who do that, and but even then, with the images they're choosing, their beginning and ending images and their punctuation visually is saying so much. You know, nothing is free of it. I mean, even in our own field in psychological research, what they're discovering is that researchers tend to find what they're looking for, which is
Yes.
another way of saying sometimes the research is influenced by what the researcher is wanting out of it. And I don't think there's any documentarian that hasn't been affected by their material. I mean, even this interview, you know, it's like I live in LA. I work in the film industry. I've curated this set here, of course. You know, I'm sitting in front of a fireplace. I've got these plants here. These are all
Yeah.
things that I have within 5 feet of this setting.
Yeah.
But I position the camera in such a place and I put the lights in such a way because I'm trying to maintain, and again, look back to
Yeah, there might
psychology.
be piles of dirty clothing and
That would be so great. I mean,
that'd
I
be
do have
fascinating.
pants on for anyone who's wondering, but
Oh, okay.
I have shoes
But
on.
no shoes. I didn't see any shoes. Yeah,
But
yeah.
my point is that maintaining the frame, containing the psychological material is vitally important. And
Going back to pornography,
yeah,
uh, there's that same feedback loop of um, that people are aware that they're on camera and
absolutely.
they're aware of the lexicon of pornography as it has progressed or devolved, however you look at it.
Yeah,
And so they it's kind of a can you top this?
absolutely. And also just the whole realness question comes into play. Like I'm sure there, when non-actors, amateurs as they're called, sort of flooded the scene, not like, everybody was like, well, screw it. I'm not going to, I can just go on and take my clothes off and do what I want to do and there'll be viewers for it. There is no, there's only a few pornographic setups that are sort of, it's all become fused together. What's real and what's actors and who is actually having sex and what's the authenticity of the connection. Whereas the intimacy, the viewer is looking for whatever they're looking for. There's any number of erotic signifiers that are key to people's arousal, and it's particular to whoever you are. And
Yeah,
you're out there looking for things, and who's to say if it's real or not? Who's to say who's trafficked, who's not, who's doing it willingly, who's on drugs? I mean, it's a wild west, but it goes right to the question of what's real and what's valuable.
yeah.
It's hard to figure out.
Partly what triggered that for me was you said there's no Emmy of for reality shows. There are no award shows, but there is in pornography. There is kind of an Oscars
Yeah, yeah,
ceremony that they have for pornography professionals,
yeah.
which is interesting. And so, do you think that we're going to see some kind of Emmy for reality stars emerge?
I hope so, and I hope it's in the Emmys. I know that they have one for unscripted, a term they call unscripted, but they always give it to shows that are like Top Chef or these other kind of shows, which are they're competition shows or something. They don't give it to the docudramas, and I'll tell you why. They don't give it to it because it's women's programming. I really believe that's the reason they
I'm
choose
sorry, what was the reason again?
because it's women's programming. I believe it's a sort of patriarchal hold in which drama has on it, and so they are valuing the sports part, which is the competition show. So Top Chef, wonderful show. I've worked on Top Chef franchise shows. Many people I know have. It's a great show, but
Yeah,
it's not a docu-soap. It's not the kind of show I'm talking about.
yeah, yeah,
That's closer to sports. Competition reality shows don't interest me at all.
yeah.
And the reason is that they don't have enough of the emotional content. They have packages in the same way they have sports. Like you find a little bit out about the chef and where they've come from and what their
Yeah,
backstory is, but you don't actually see them fight in the way that the docu soaps fight. So they do give an unscripted award, but it's always to Top Chef or one of these competition shows. It's never to the emotional shows.
yeah, yeah. I'm realizing there are so many categories that I wasn't even thinking of before. But like I've watched a little bit of American Ninja, I think
Yeah,
it's called, because I have a grandson who's kind of turned onto that stuff.
that
And
guy.
I find it fascinating. Is the guy going to make it or fall in the water?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, people know how to make TV, and that means they know how to draw you in. So it's like
Yeah,
the
yeah,
cooking shows, whatever kind of shows they make. The Naked and Afraid is a show I love. I edited a Naked and Afraid show, and I actually wanted to be on the show. I almost talked the producer into letting me go on, but I was like near the end of my training, and I was just like, no, I can't be a therapist and be naked on a survival show, But
yeah, yeah. So, and there was an Israeli drama that later became a American one. I'm blocking on the names of these things, but you probably are aware of it, where it was a therapy. It was about therapy.
yeah, there's one. There's a couple great There's one recently, was it called Treatment, that I saw. There's a couple really great
The
shows.
Treatment, I think, is the name of one, right?
Yeah, there's a couple great shows about
Yeah.
therapy and therapists that I think are wonderful. And there's some other, yeah, there's some great shows. And I'm guessing there'll be more. There was a wonderful one recently also that was not, I could go on about that. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting. I would never, I've been asked before, and people ask me the question, would I go on camera as a therapist? And the answer is, I definitely wouldn't, because I find that I'd be concerned that for the reason for what I was doing, I'd be very concerned about what my motivations are and why I felt the need to be on camera.
Yeah.
Would I be polluting the treatment? I would be very worried about that.
This good. My mind just goes, this is such fertile ground that we're talking about. My mind's shooting off in
Oh,
all kinds of directions.
I believe I have a whole page of sort of like prompt notes for myself over the things that I've thought over the years. And you've hit some of them, but my point is that I haven't even had to touch them because I've just been bouncing off of you because you've been asking great questions, and like there's so many places to discover in this terrain.
Well, I'm remembering the doctor theaters where
Yeah,
the patient would be brought in,
yeah,
and the great professor
yeah,
would show waxy flexibility of the arms, or whatever he was demonstrating. That was a kind of reality
yeah.
show in a way.
I agree. I think so. And I'm sure the professors had their own flair and their own style, and they would, I'm sure, do insane things and pull on tendons and watch arms go limp or whatever
Yeah.
god awful thing they were up to. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. I also have a bunch of questions, and I've just been so engaged that I haven't really gone to them. And one really important one, I think, is to talk about Donald Trump and The
Oh,
Apprentice.
oh my God.
And 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 right below that, I've got fake news question mark. I
Yeah.
think he's the first person that I ever heard use that term of fake news. Now I don't know if he invented it or where it came from, but it's fascinating that he keeps calling other things fake news,
Yeah.
and in a way his whole show was fake news,
Yeah.
right? A
Well,
very scripted
yeah,
reality show.
this is a callback to your earlier question, and I think, and I'm glad because I feel like popped out of the whole like what are the bad parts of reality TV, and then when now you bring it up now, I remember, oh, I know what I wanted to say about that. I do think something that you could describe as bad is the presidency of Donald Trump. Now, and forget my political leanings. I don't even mean that. It could be anybody, but he's the person who was a reality TV star who
Yeah.
became a president, and that's why it's germane to talk about it. Mark Burnett, who was in charge of the show, The Apprentice, he bears some weight in this. And I wonder if he feels guilty or clever or excited or happy or sad or what he feels. So we might never know. And there's a wonderful article in the New Yorker about this. But Donald Trump, pre-Apprentice, was a little bit washed up and washed out. He's not the greatest businessman, and those are just facts that anyone can research.
Right.
He's not a great investor, which anybody can research. He
Right.
doesn't manage businesses very well, and he's not ethical at all. And these are all public record elements.
Yeah.
He's got a gut instinct. He's a very psychological character, and he's a wonderful reality TV character for this reason. It's just unfortunate that he's also the president. So the way this show characterized Donald Trump was that it was as a very smart, very ruthless, very astute, and very successful business tycoon, right? This was all relatively made up. Is he a fantastic con man and jumping from shady loan to shady loan? Yes. But our prison systems are full of those people. They just don't have the backing of the Trump brand and of Mark Burnett or other reality TV shows.
Yeah.
And so Mark Burnett built this character called Donald Trump. Now, he already existed as a playboy and a floozy and a flunky, but he was now positioned as this incredibly powerful businessman, and it was completely made up by the show. He played it to a T. The show supported him, and they built this brand. They rebuilt this Donald Trump brand.
Uh-huh.
And the person that people voted for, the so-called base, they know him as the reality TV star Donald Trump, which I've already demonstrated to you is not actually who he is. And just like the reality TV feedback loop, I am 100% convinced that he thinks he's the person that Mark Burnett invented, Donald Trump, right? And so he's going forward with a set of assumptions. He's playing to his base, who are going forward on a set of assumptions, which have all been created by incredibly prolific and fantastically talented producers who make this thing called reality TV. And if you ever wonder how powerful the tool is, you only have to look at Donald Trump to realize it's this whole strange of tech and media converging into this form called reality TV, and voila, we have our current political climate. It's really fascinating.
Yeah. And so this idea of fake news, I mean, we are at a juncture where we don't know what to believe. And one of the phrases that you used in your writing was "seeing is believing," which really connected for me, is that we have the way our brain is wired. We seeing is believing.
Yeah,
That's kind of how we've come
yeah,
up until this point, where now we have to always question ourselves. And this is only getting worse as the technology gets even better
yeah,
at being able to show Obama and put words with his voice and ideas out there in a way that looks like, hey, this is what he's saying, but it's not what he said. But the technology can manipulate it to the extent that it looks and sounds like this is him speaking,
yeah.
so that basically anything can be falsified now. And that's a terribly upsetting place to be, I think, for us.
It's scary. I mean, those are, those, what you're speaking to, fakes. Fakes are very real advances in tech, which allow us to put images and words in a very convincing way, especially if you're not savvy, and create a false reality that someone can see. We can, like you said, we can watch Obama say things that he didn't say, and that's very real. And sort of the tech police and the tech bandits are going ratcheting it up, trying to ferret each other out and create more convincing fakes. But in the world of reality TV, there's also a sort of fake news aspect in that, frankly, Donald Trump as a competent businessman is fake news. And we do perpetuate things that are unreal in the reality world that people come to take as real, and I think that as we sort of go further down the rabbit hole of fake news, I sort of feel like the only way forward is, we will never beat it back. The only way forward is becoming more savvy with the way we ingest things, the way we accept things. I think soon we'll no longer be dealing with the reality question in reality TV. Enough people will understand that it's a produced content and that the real thing is the emotions. And if you enjoy it, enjoy it. And if you don't enjoy it. But don't rant about it not being a real kind of thing. And I think likewise,
It's like professional wrestling, right? And
absolutely.
we all sort of now, a lot of us, not all of us, but a lot of us know that wrestling is kind of fake, and
Yeah.
uh, I'm not sure that everybody,
I think we understand it as theater.
yeah,
I think
as
definitely
theater,
part of
exactly.
it understands it as theater and understand it as professional wrestlers are another great example of the archetypes, right? There's villains, there's good guys, there's heroes, there's weaklings, there's
Yeah,
fools, and I think I do think that the narrative of I don't think that reality TV has dumbed down our abilities to discern um, what we like and what we don't like. Do you know what I mean? Like it's still a valid place that we go to see our culture reflected and to have the experience we want to. But it's important to remember that it's it's entertainment. It's
yeah.
entertainment. It does have weight, but it's entertainment.
It's just paradoxical to me, although as a psychologist, it wouldn't be paradoxical to us, that Trump keeps railing against fake news.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's how he that's how he got to be who he is because he was fake news.
Yeah, it's really remarkable. It's confounding. I mean, from as a psychotherapist, a lot, and I think this must have been the experience of people all through the ages, who are involved in the healing arts. Like it's confounding to see these things happening around us. shakes my own foundations to realize there's no real protection against this type of belief. We begin to cross over into the realm of faith, right? And I think that's kind of what we're knocking our heads against, is that there's some people that there'll never be enough proof for anything, and that may go for those on the left as well. Who knows? There might be some policy that is of value that's coming from lawmakers who identify as Republican, and maybe they don't want it just because they're Republicans. But my point is that space of belief is so impenetrable, and I'm sure but as a practicing psychotherapist, it's just there's some beliefs that I'll never pierce, and in fact, I simply have to work just knowing that I'll never pierce them, and I work towards the treatment goals, knowing that we've got this giant elephant in the room that I've got to move around.
Yeah. Well, I guess we're going to wind this thing down at some point here, because we could just keep talking for a long time, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there anything that we haven't said? You had a whole list, and maybe there's something on there that you really feel like, well, this has got to be out there.
Well, I think, like, for me, the important thing for me to get out there to people is simply that there is a psychological cost at exposing yourself on the internet. And it's something that we love to do. We love to share and expose ourselves to the internet. And so for me, the thing that I have really learned, because I as I said, I used to be mercenary. I wasn't interested in the shows I was making. I was interested in the paychecks. That really changed for me. And I became vitally interested in the shows. And I started to see their value. So I sort of had a reversal. And at the same time, I began to realize that, people are in all ways, whether they're writing op-eds or they're tweeting or they're on YouTube, are putting themselves in harm's way. I'm not saying like, oh my God, there's this harm. I'm saying be conscious about your interaction with this medium. It's very powerful. And once you sort of involve yourself, the trolls come out of the woodwork, the people saying horrible things, as soon as you expose yourself, horrible things can happen to you. So for me, it's mainly that, like, this medium is maturing. Our access to it is increasing. The way it's affecting us, vis-a-vis the president, for example, is really shifting all the cultural sort of norms and sands. And I'm saying, okay, great. There's no turning back, but let's be aware. Let's bring awareness to this aspect,
Yeah. The people that really need to hear that message are young people.
Absolutely.
And I'm starting to imagine you going to high schools and giving a presentation of some sort. I know you don't want me heaping more work on your plate.
So I want to always travel where I'm needed. I have this specialty, and so, people within the reality world, I have a special thing to offer them. But I also feel like, there's something very human about the whole experience. Example of who you are. It goes to the core of ourselves. Reality TV and the way we project ourselves on these platforms goes right to the core of who we are, how we build ourselves, what we think of ourselves versus what the world sees of us. They're like really core identity questions that are embedded within the reality TV and the possibilities that it brings, whether it's Snapchat, TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, or broadcast television. It is like, all of Jung's sort of elemental pieces, the self, the persona, the shadow, the anima and animus, like those are like, social media is like a third rail for these aspects of the self.
Yeah.
It can be completely benign when the power is turned off, but when the power is turned on, it will just, the shock it will give one. Anyone who's been on the end of a troll, event knows what I'm talking about. It can be really sort of self-shattering, and it's hard to hold on to yourself when that kind of energy is bounced back to you. Just in the same way that the stars of the 60s, Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, you name them, they were destroyed by the projections of this mass culture, which was a new thing. And that's too much for anyone to bear. I'm speaking from a depth perspective here.
Yeah.
But likewise, when those projections and that vitriol and the anger and the confusion is put onto you via the internet, it's too much to bear as well, and it can destroy somebody.
Well, that's a good, strong ending as the showrunner here.
You are. You're the showrunner of.
So, Ian Spencer, I want to thank you for being my guest today on Shrink Wrap Radio. It's been totally delightful for me.
Thanks. I'm really deeply honored, and I'm just this green person walking amongst giants of all the people you've interviewed through the years, and I'm so grateful for the things that you have brought to the psychotherapy table. Thank you, thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you.